this is your host, Austin Hopkins, and welcome to the Introvert Leader Podcast. Welcome to episode 21. Happy to have you guys here listening today. Today's episode is going to be kind of short and a little bit different than the normal format. Just kind of want to give a quick update on what I've been up to recently, and then also wanted to celebrate kind of a big milestone for the podcast. So before we do that, let me share with you what I've been into recently. So recently, I have been listening to the artist Gunna, Gunna, hip-hop artist who has been kind of on a steady incline as far as their relevance and success over the last 5 to 7 years, I would say. Really enjoy his stuff. He collaborates with a lot of the other artists I like, and he released a new album, I believe, within the last 4 or 5 months. I really like that album, but I also like his old stuff too. So check out Gunna if you haven't. I think you're going to enjoy it if you like rap, hip hop, that kind of stuff. All right, movies. I recently watched a movie with Asa yesterday, actually, called Quiz Lady. I believe it's by Will Ferrell's production company, and it's with Awkwafina and the gal that's from Grey's Anatomy. I'm blanking on her name right now, but super funny. Really, really enjoyed the comedy. A lot of big stars in there, Will Ferrell, among others, but I enjoyed it, and I think you'd enjoy it as well. So check out Quiz Lady if you haven't. You're going to enjoy it. All right, other updates for me. My parents were actually in town last week, so it was really fun to have my parents come down to AZ, stay with us, kind of get a sense of what life is like down here. And we had a blast just kind of going around sightseeing. I was able to go and check out the Frank Lloyd Wright home in Scottsdale, Arizona with my parents. And wow, was that an experience. Really famous architect, if you don't know the name, responsible for a lot of major buildings. To name one that people might be familiar with, the Guggenheim Museum in New York. So really, really cool architect. And we got to see his home, and it was awesome. And what a cool experience it was to go and check it out with my parents. Really enjoyed that. And while my parents were here, I got them kind of hooked on YouTube. I told them, I watch a lot of YouTube, and we started watching the YouTube channel Outdoor Boys. And it's a really kind of fun YouTube channel for the whole family, I would say, really. But I really enjoy it. And essentially, it's this guy who was an ex-lawyer out of Canada, and he started filming outdoor survival, camping kind of videos. So his videos, he's got one every Saturday, I think, that he posts, but it's him and his family, or just him going out on these kind of crazy adventures, filming it all. And what I love about him is that even though he's camping and doing like the most kind of intense survival situations, he brings like gourmet food and cooks that on the fire. So really kind of fun to watch. And again, my sisters, my parents, everybody loves it now, and it's good for the whole family. So really enjoyed that. And then last but not least, podcasts. I actually found a new podcast called Modern Wisdom with the host named Chris Williamson. And I had seen his clips online, but never really watched the full episode of his podcast, and decided to give it a shot. Watched my first episode the other day where he is interviewing Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman, who I've talked about on the podcast before. And it was a great episode, and I learned a lot, and highly recommend that podcast based on just that one episode and all the other clips I've seen. It's really, really good. He interviews amazing people, and who doesn't love a British accent? I mean, I could listen to a British accent all day. In fact, I catch myself going into a British accent half the time throughout the day, and so I'm just a fan of listening to people who have that accent. All right, today we have a question for our listener Q&A that comes from Brian in the UK. And Brian sent me a message and said, "Hey, Austin, I'm curious, how do I lead highly educated employees?" So he has some employees on his team that are PhD, doctorate, master's degree, and he was curious how he leads those folks. And he was basically saying they seem to expect more or have different needs than the traditional employees. So by the way, Brian, fantastic question. And I've actually been fortunate enough to have an experience where I have led highly educated folks. And here's my advice to you, Brian, and anyone who's in a similar situation. At the end of the day, they're humans. And each person has different needs and they expect different things. And really what you want to use is something called situational leadership. It's a principle that was written about in length by Dr. Paul Hershey, and it's a great book called The Situational Leader. But essentially the main focus of this kind of leadership strategy is you adapt your leadership style to the individual person you're leading. So basically, what that means in layman's terms is don't treat everyone on your team the same. If someone expects something differently, try to give them what they expect. If they need different tools or if they need a different type of communication, maybe less communication because they're so highly educated and most likely pretty driven, give them that. Give them less communication if that's what they want. Give them more communication if that's what they want. Basically, adapt yourself to that person, figure out what makes them tick, and I promise you, you will find success. They will appreciate you for it as well. Because again, I've had those employees in the past and they expect a lot from you. And when you can deliver what they expect, man, you're going to get great results. So hopefully that helps out, Brian. And again, guys, always down to answer questions. So send me a message at theintrovertleader@gmail.com. I'd love to answer any of your questions, career, entrepreneurship, business, self-care, self-development, personal development, you name it. Anything's welcome. All right, moving on. So I mentioned earlier we had a milestone for the podcast. So guys, I'm excited to share. Drum roll. This week is special because we crossed the 100-country mark. Let that sink in, folks. That means there are listeners in over 100 countries around the world who are listening to this podcast on a regular basis. I'm blown away. I cannot believe it. So excited by that. And just been kind of watching the stats every day, waiting for that extra country to show up. 99, 100, 101. So really excited to share that. And I'm not remiss by thinking that this was all on my own. Of course it wasn't. It's because folks like you were listening. You guys are talking about the podcast with other folks. You're sharing it with your family, your coworkers, and I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I genuinely mean that. It's really been amazing, the support I've got from this podcast, something I had no experience with before, and it seems to be resonating with folks. So really proud and excited to share that we are in over 100 countries, folks. I don't know how many countries total there are in the world. I should know that, but my goal is to get listeners in all of them. So that's the next big goal. All right, moving on. YouTube. I think I've mentioned this multiple times, but I'm on YouTube, folks. I felt like I needed to get a YouTube channel and kind of share more content. So I actually started a new series on YouTube called Bike Thoughts. And essentially, I've mentioned on the podcast before that I'm a big biker. So I take a couple rides every week, maybe an hour each ride. And I started bringing a camera along and just kind of talking about the thoughts I have on my bike. Because a lot of times, when I'm riding my bike, that's like the best time for me to process stuff and think about stuff and figure out what's going well, what's not going well, and really have what I'll call deep or important thoughts. So check that out. My YouTube channel is the @_the introvert leader. So _the introvert leader. Or you can probably just type in Austin Hopkins and find me as well. But new episodes every week is kind of the goal. And I'm really excited. I just today recorded my first video interview for the podcast with the CEO of Nudge Solutions, Reagan Bonley. So I've had a chance to work with him over the last 6 months on a couple of different things, and the guy's awesome, and the episode was awesome. So really excited. I'll be putting that full episode on YouTube along with a few of the other episodes of the podcast that I've started recording via video as well. So really excited about that. And then to wrap up, guys, although this was a short episode, don't think I'm not going to give you a challenge because I'm giving you one, whether or not you want it. And here's the challenge. I learned something interesting during that episode I listened to of the Modern Wisdom podcast, and specifically from Dr. Andrew Huberman. He was talking about how we have this part in our brain, I believe it's called the AMCC, and essentially that's responsible for helping us get through tough things. It's responsible for our tenacity, our willingness to try really difficult things, what he likes to call macro or micro sucks. And so what he says is that when we start to take on that big, hard thing that we've been avoiding, right? That big, hard thing during the day that you don't want to do, right? That thing that you've been putting off, that you're saying, I'm going to do tomorrow. But that when we do those things, when we do that hard thing, that you're going to feel relief, but it's also going to help you better equipped for the rest of the things that you have to do, the other tough things. So the challenge to you is simple this week. There's something that's been going on in your life that you want to do, that you know you should do, but you haven't done because it's hard, right? I don't know what that is for you. Maybe it's personal related. Maybe it's having a tough conversation. Maybe it's something at work. Maybe it's with your family. Whatever it is, there's something hard that you know you need to do, but you haven't done it. Guys, I'm there too. I've done it so many times. And my challenge to you this week is this: do that hard thing. Just do it. Just accept the fact that it's going to suck, but know that as soon as you do that, you're going to be ready for the next thing. And that relief you're going to feel after having done that. I mean, think about the times when you've done something hard in your life. How good do you feel afterwards? I don't think there's a time you feel better. You feel so freaking good after you do that. So the challenge this week: do the hard thing. Do the micro or the macro suck, as Dr. Huberman says, and see what happens. I know I'm going to try that. And I want to say thank you so much for listening. Make it a great day. This has been the Introvert Leader Podcast. Subscribe for new episodes every other Wednesday.